Hello, my freaky darlings. I'm Zeffy Winks, and the past is never dead. It's not even past. Have you heard of the Rusty Lake or Cube Escape game series? It's a video game franchise made by the indie development team Rusty Lake. I stumbled on it 8 years ago when their game Hotel was first released, and I happened upon a Let's Play of it. I immediately knew that this was going to be a game for me, and went out to seek not only that game, but the rest of the franchise. And as you can see, it has become a bit of a favorite of mine. Now, after 17 games, a short movie, and multiple ARGs, I have spent hours, on stream and off stream, taking copious lore notes and getting every achievement, making sure I've experienced it all, so that I am finally ready to talk about Rusty Lake. It is a perfectly macabre and mysterious universe, and I am so excited to share it with you. But to avoid confusion, I thought it would be best to make sure we're all on the same page before we start trying to theorize. I think the best way to do that would be to start with a timeline video. There wouldn't have to be any theorizing at all. A lot of the important dates are explicitly laid out for us. But even if you have played all the games, it can be difficult to keep track of, because you experience them out of order, or through flashback, or memories. I'll discuss things that directly happen in the game, or things we explicitly learn about in canon sources. I'm going to do my absolute best to leave theory out of it, keep it all on facts so that we have a nice strong foundation together before we start letting our imagination run wild. I did also look at the Rusty Lake timeline wiki page to double check my information, but anything on there that I couldn't directly verify for myself, I did not include in this timeline video. That being said, this franchise runs the gambit of 1750 to 2020 so far. So I wound up needing to make this a two-parter to make it even remotely manageable. The last thing is, in case you've never seen or played any of the Rusty Lake series, I'll quickly go over the themes and plot elements to you. But I encourage you to check this series out. It's not very expensive. It's all available on Steam. The whole series takes place surrounding a mystical lake. It is incredibly powerful, though how and where it gets its power from is still not entirely clear. It gives or receives power through these special cubes. These cubes are memories, but there is more to it than that. There is power in them, like a piece of someone's soul. Most of the cubes we see in this series are black, but there are at least 3 other kinds: white, blue, and gold. The exact nature of these cubes and the differences between them will have to be a video for another day. But suffice it for now that the black cubes, in general, tend to mean bad memories or inner demons. The white cubes, good memories or inner peace. The blue cubes come up when memories are changed within oneself, though whether they actually change the past or just your memories of the past is not quite clear. And the gold cubes, well, those are very special. We've only seen them 3 times so far in the franchise, and they come about by combining the other cubes together. So their meaning is a unity of memory or of soul. They may even have the power to change the future, since the characters keeping record of such things describe them like this in their book. The memories not only hold the key to the past, but also the future. The other key story feature is the elixir of life and death. Whenever it is used in pairs, with one imbiber finding only death, and the other reaching enlightenment. Enlightenment, in this case, is both immortality, or at the very least, an unnaturally long life, and an enlightened humanoid animal form. Most of the story revolves around two families, the Eilanders and the Vanderbooms, and two individuals, Dale Vandermeer and Harvey. Just Harvey. He is possibly the most mysterious character in the franchise, which is saying something, with no clear indication on how he came involved. Extra strange, because he's a parrot. This story uses alchemy, magic, science, and mysticism to explore the themes of life and death, past and future, fate and choice. But there is also almost 300 years of plot to cover, so unless I want this to end up being a three-parter, I should get down to it. Our timeline starts in the summer of 1750, with the birth of our first character, Carolyn. She went on to at some point marry Nicholas, and joined the Eilander family of his mother Margaret and brother Gerard. They all lived on the family island in the middle of Rusty Lake, called Paradise. In the winter of 1775, Carolyn and Nicholas went on to have their first child, Jacob Eilander, which they followed up by two more children, Elizabeth and then David, although I couldn't find their exact dates of birth. At some point, Carolyn discovered the secret to the ritual of the elixir of life and death, using 10 different elements. She recorded it in a hidden cave on Paradise. In 1781, Nicholas attempted to sacrifice 6-year-old Jacob to the lake, but Carolyn intervened, begging him to take her instead. Young Jacob was sent away. It is unclear how long it takes Nicholas to start up his attempt of the ritual again, but when he does, Carolyn is burned at the stake, put into a coffin, then placed in the lake, their family surrounding it and praying to the lake for enlightenment. Instead, Paradise is struck by plagues. 15 years after sending his son away, Nicholas writes to Jacob on April 22nd, 1796, begging him to come back to Paradise, telling him his mother was dead and that he was needed there. Jacob did return to Paradise, and through the series of puzzles, managed to eradicate the plagues, finding black cubes of his mother's memories along the way. Carolyn had hidden the final ingredient to the elixir of life and death from her husband, but revealed that ingredient to Jacob through her memories. In the end, Jacob was burned on the effigy of an owl, his family praying once again for enlightenment. Instead, it was Jacob who received enlightenment, entangling with the memories of his mother, and given power by the lake, and becoming the self-proclaimed guardian of the lake, Mr. Owl. His final vision was that of Paradise itself being reborn into a great hotel. It's also important to note that during these events, the parrot named Harvey is seen around the island. In the winter of 1799, Aldous Vanderboom was born. I couldn't find the date of birth for his brother William, or the theoretical third child of the Vanderbooms, so I'm not sure if they are younger or older than Aldous. William owns a family home on the shores of Rusty Lake, and he and Aldous learn of the great elixir of life and death, and begin working on it. In the spring of 1859, William and Aldous finally succeed in making a form of the elixir with their alchemy. William drank first and died, but when Aldous drank, he was enlightened and transformed into Mr. Crow. In the spring of 1860, William's nephew James received a letter telling him of his uncle's death and his inheritance of the family home. He arrived there and planted a tree in the yard, one that would become a great family fixture. The spirits of William and Aldous stayed with James, seemingly needing something from their future kin. In the summer of 1865, James proposed to and wed his sweetheart Mary. In the winter of 1866, Ida Razingier was born, a character important for later. On April 26, 1867, James and Mary had triplets: Samuel, Emma, and Albert. We know that by the summer of 1870, the Paradise Hotel exists, because important guests can be seen through the window, and guests that will return later. In that same season, James also discovered the secret laboratory of his uncles, and on July 25th, he managed to recreate their elixir of life and death. He tested it on his dog first, who lived and became immortal. Thinking it safe, he drank it after and promptly died. In the spring of 1884, Emma became pregnant. The scene we are shown is this being from a magical flower. We'll talk about theories about that another time. She gave birth to Frank Vanderboom, though we don't know his exact birth date. In October of 1888, Vincent van Gogh cut off his own ear, and gazing into it, stared into a field of his own mind, and found a black cube memory and a white cube memory. Those came together and became an image of the Starry Night, presumably giving him his inspiration for the famous painting he would go on to make in June of 1889. This probably seems like a pretty random factoid. And it is. One of the first Cube Escape games, possibly before they planned on making it a connected universe, was starring Van Gogh. But because he interacted with these special black and white memory cubes, that does firmly put this adventure in this connected universe. And someday it might be important. For now, I thought it was a funny inclusion. In the summer of 1889, Ida Raisinger, a traveling fortune teller, met Samuel and read his fortune and the fortune of his family with her tarot cards and crystal ball. She and Samuel also spent the night together, leading to their son Leonard, with no exact birthday known. In the fall of 1891, Albert tricked Emma's son Frank into falling in the family's well. No one else witnessed or was told of this event, so Emma simply thought that Frank went missing and began to search for him. She wrote her son a letter to be delivered by Harvey, hoping it would reach Frank somehow. For a very small bit of theory, I do think that this letter scene was meant to take place a little bit later in the timeline. She writes that she has been searching for her son for so long, but both of these instances say they take place in the same season and year as each other. For that to be the case, it could not have been more than 2 months at the very most. Admittedly, a long time to be missing your 5-year-old son, so it is possible that this is an intentional shared date. In 1893, the important anthropomorphized animal guests arrive back again at the Paradise Hotel. The same ones we saw earlier through the window. Mr. Deer, Mr. Rabbit, Mrs. Pigeon, Mrs. Pheasant, and Mr. Boar. Mr. Crow and a now humanoid Harvey help Mr. Owl kill his guests and trap their corrupted souls in confinement. They extract black memory cubes from each of them. Harvey sees a vision of Dale Vandermeer ascending from the lake into the hotel. The next year, in 1894, these corrupted souls break their confinements and attack the humanoid Harvey. He is hit suddenly by a great white light and turned back into the parrot Harvey. This is very similar to what we see happen the day Emma gives Harvey her letter. The other main reason why I think that this 1984 is meant to be when the letter scene takes place. In the winter of 1895, Samuel and Ida are married and take a family portrait, including their son Leonard, about 6 at this time. In the summer of 1896, 5 years after Frank fell into the well, Emma gives up all hope of finding him. She paints one last picture, then hangs herself from the family's tree. That same winter, while playing a game with his family, Albert is given a gift by Mr. Crow. A deer mask skull, a symbol he grows to use while practicing his dark arts. We also learn that Albert has fallen in love with his brother's wife Ida. On May 1st, 1904, while the family was playing music together, Albert suddenly snapped, his mother dying in this process, either of shock or Albert killing her himself. Albert used his magic on Samuel and Ida, controlling them, torturing them, and then finally killing them, and removing one of each of their eyes. He also extracted an ovum from Ida, and, using alchemy, combined it with his own DNA to make himself a daughter. He named Rose. In the spring of 1914, Leonard left the family home to go fight in World War I. He returned the winter of 1918, missing a leg from his battles in the trenches. In the fall of 1919, 10-year-old Rose contacted the spirit of William using an Ouija board. He told her he wished to live again, and that she was to use the family's sacrifices and timepieces to do that. In the fall of 1924, Rose found Frank, kept alive and captive at the bottom of the well for 33 years by Albert, and she helps him escape his prison. Around October or November of 1925, Albert, feeling the pressing of his mortality, began working on a cubicle device to initiate his resurrection should his death come to pass. He finished in January of 1926 and wrote his daughter a letter instructing her how to begin the process when he died. That following fall, still 1926, Frank strangles Albert to death after beating him in a game of chess. At his wake, Rose found his letter and established contact with herself in the future through this and another cubicle device. She sent her future Rose aspects of her father through time using these devices. In the fall of 1929, Leonard found the first of the timepieces, the bronze one, out in the yard, buried near the family tree. In the winter of 1930, Harvey returned to the house and delivered Emma's letter to Frank. He followed the instructions she had written inside and was led to the silver timepiece. On December 18, 1930, Dale Vandermeer was born, the same one that Harvey had a vision of years earlier. On July 6, 1931, Robert Bob Hill was born, a character who will be important in Part 2. In the fall of 1932, Rose spent the night grave digging and found herself the final golden timepiece. The following spring, in 1933, Frank and Rose shared a dance, where Rose willingly gave up the final sacrifice needed for the ritual, her own blood. The other sacrifices had already been spiritually collected over the years since James inherited the house. In 1935, Frank, Leonard, and Rose used their timepieces to activate the sacrifices and became entangled in the roots of the family tree. William found himself in a Samsara room, a room of rebirth, where his soul was transformed over and over before finally being reborn as Laura Vanderboom, whom Rose raised as a daughter. And that brings us to the end of the first part of the timeline, what I would call the Mr. Owl and Mr. Crow era. In the next part, we will cover the Dale and Laura era of the story. Thank you so much for watching. This timeline had a lot of work put into it, and I'm really excited to dig further into these mysteries. I have a lot of ideas for analysis videos and theory videos, lots coming down the pipeline for Rusty Lake in the future. If this story sounds at all interesting to you, I highly recommend you check out the game series by Rusty Lake. They're all available on Steam, they're not very expensive, and you would be helping out a really great indie development team. If you want to see more of the gameplay before you make your decision on that, I do have Let's Play VODs of my streams, collecting the information and achievements over on my sister channel. Or if you would rather talk more creepy lore, I have a FNAF theory video that I am really proud of. If you enjoyed this video, please consider hitting the like button. It's super important, especially for a brand new channel. And be sure to subscribe so that you can see part 2 of the Rusty Lake timeline. Otherwise, let me know your thoughts. And remember, Buildings burn. People die. But the internet is forever. See you in the next one.